Hi everyone, my name is Tanner Yoder, and today I am doing my endangered species animal project on the hawksbill sea turtle. So let's get started with a few key features about the hawksbill sea turtle. So the Latin name of the hawksbill sea turtle is known as Imiltrus imbricata, and then the species lives throughout the Atlantic, Pacific, and Indian Ocean. When they are getting ready to lay their eggs, they can lay up to 130 to 160 eggs at one time, which is super unique and cool to them. They also have an estimated lifespan about 30 to 40 years. And then over here on the left, we have a picture of what the hawksbill sea turtle looks like. Now we are going to discuss and go into some of the different diets that the hawksbill sea turtle has. So the main things that the hawksbill sea turtle will eat is marine algae and sea sponges, but we consider the hawksbill sea turtle to be an omnivore, which means it eats both plants and animals. And so the main plant that the hawksbill sea turtle will eat is going to be algae, and we have a picture down here of a hawksbill sea turtle eating algae at the bottom of the seafloor. And so this helps the ocean as the hawksbill sea turtle make sure that the algae isn't growth isn't going unchecked. And so it's constantly eating the algae, which makes sure it's healthy and that it's growing and it's not overgrown. And then some of the other animals that the hawksbill sea turtle eat are jellyfish, crustaceans, sea urchins, and then mollusks. And then one unique aspect of their diet is that the hawksbill sea turtle has the ability to also eat sea sponges. And what is unique to sea sponges is that many of them have a toxin inside of them. And this toxin, when other animals eat them, it can ultimately lead to their death as it causes disease and illness. And so when the hawksbill sea turtle eats these sea sponges, their body fat is able to absorb the toxin, which prevents them from getting ill at all. So they are able to eat as many sea sponges as they will like without being injured or harmed. Causes of endangerment with the hawksbill sea turtle. So some of the main causes of endangerment are going to be shell trade, egg collection, and then oil contamination and marine debris ingestion. So what I mean by shell trade is that many of the hawksbill sea turtles will be killed for their shells, and in some cultures, the hawksbill sea turtle has a unique shell to it. It has a unique design. So many people will kill the hawksbill sea turtle for their shell. And when they get their shell, they'll engrave carvings and stuff like that on the back of it, and they'll use it as decor for their house. And so this is seen in other cultures who use this as a decoration. And then another thing that happens with the eggs of a hawksbill sea turtle is that many of their eggs are taken and they are either eaten or they're collected. And so with the hawksbill sea turtle, since it's such a delicacy, many eggs poachers will take the eggs of hawksbill sea turtles and they will sell them to fancy restaurants and stuff like that. And over here to the left, we have someone who found the hawksbill sea turtle nest and is starting to begin to collect their eggs. And then marine debris ingestion is another cause of endangerment because many of the hawksbill sea turtles are eating plastic and eating other stuff that's not good for their bodies. And so they are injuring their stomachs because they're eating plastic and materials that they shouldn't be eating because of basically waste being in the ocean. So here's a picture down here of all the trash that is in the ocean. And since many hawksbill sea turtles don't understand or don't really know what they can eat, they will eat this stuff and it will, in the end, harm them and result in their death. And then some other stuff is oil contamination plays a big role in this, as the hawksbill sea turtle can get poisoned in a way from the oil in the ocean. And so this is another major cause of endangerment with the hawksbill sea turtle. Behavior. So the hawksbill sea turtle has a unique behavior in that it spends most of its time sleeping or resting on rocks and ledges. So it doesn't do much outside of its time, which is super unique to them. And then another unique aspect is that they live in solitude for most of their life. So many people would think that they interact with they live in a group or a family that they always travel around with, but they don't. So these creatures prefer to live in solitude for most of their life. They are shy, and so they will not interact with any other organism, other animal, except for an exception with the females, and that is only when they mate, which is about every 3 to 4 years. And when they do interact with a female, studies have shown that they do have a unique social behavior towards the females. They will, in some cases, touch the female's head and nuzzle the head in a way. There have been also cases in which the hawksbill sea turtle will either bite them or even show uh, extreme amounts of aggression towards the female. But since they don't interact much, there's more research that needs to be done on their behavior. But other than that, they mostly spend their time resting or gathering their food. So now we're going to get into the population of the hawksbill sea turtle. So the average population size of the hawksbill sea turtle is around 20 to 30,000. And so typically when the hawksbill sea turtle, like I said before, when they get ready to mate with a female, they will show those different behaviors toward the female. And then the female, when they are ready to lay their eggs, will go upon a beach at night. And what is super unique to them is that the same beach that the female was born on, they will go back to that same beach to lay their eggs, which is super unique because they don't go and find a new beach or a new place to lay their eggs. They go back to the beach that they've always been at. And so the females will go upon the beach at night and they will dig a hole with their flippers. They'll lay their eggs and then they'll take their flippers and they will flick up the sand in an effort to cover their eggs. And then what is also unique is that most species typically take care of their eggs after they lay them and make sure that they're getting nutrition and that the babies are born fine, and they also protect them. The hawksbill sea turtle does not do that. Once the mother is laying the egg, she's back in the ocean, and it is all up to the baby hawksbill sea turtles now. And so here's a picture down here on the left of the hawksbill sea turtle babies hatching, and they're making their way, as you can see, to the ocean. Community. So now we will get into the community with the hawksbill sea turtle. So some of the main predators for the hawksbill sea turtle include sharks, large fish, octopus, and crocodiles. And so over here to the left, we have a picture of a shark eating the hawksbill sea turtle. And so even though the hawksbill sea turtle has many different predators that are consuming it, they have unique aspects to them which help provide a defense mechanism. And what I mean by this is that they have their shell on their back, which is extremely hard and extremely tough to get through. And so many predators struggle when they try to attack because their shell on their back is so hard and so tough to get through. And then another key aspect about the hawksbill is that they're flippers. So their flippers are super unique as they are able to flee and swim quickly away when they sense that there is a predator nearby. And so when the hawksbill sea turtle feels that they are threatened or a predator is coming up to them, they will use their flippers and they will propel themselves and quickly swim fast away in order to ensure their safety. And then some other predators of the hawksbill sea turtle are crabs, humans, and dogs. And what I mean by this is with their nest. So this has to deal more with their nest, as many of these predators right here destroy the hawksbill sea turtle nest. And so dogs will dig up their eggs when they smell them, and they'll dig up and destroy the eggs. Crabs will also eat these eggs, as well as the baby hawksbill sea turtle. Down here on the left, we have a picture of these yellow crabs eating a hawksbill sea turtle before it even made its way to the beach, which is extremely sad. But these animals will eat baby hawksbill sea turtles. And then some other interesting things is that the hawksbill sea turtle has to compete with other organisms for food. Like I said before, it will mostly eat sponges and algae. And so the hawksbill sea turtle also has to compete with the angelfish, pufferfish, leatherfish, and boxfish for when they have to eat sponges. Now let's get into the ecosystem and the importance of the hawksbill sea turtle to the marine ecosystem. So the main thing that the hawksbill sea turtle does is it maintains the health of the coral reef by consuming sponges. And what I mean by this is that when it consumes sponges, it allows for coral to grow and develop, which allows other organisms to build their homes inside of it. And so by constantly consuming sponges, it helps make sure that there's not an overabundance amount of sponges and that they are being continually eaten. And this is the same thing with algae, because with algae, if there's too much of a growth with algae, it causes coral to die because it will ultimately suffocate if there's too much algae growth on coral. And so by constantly eating algae, the hawksbill sea turtle makes sure that the coral remain healthy and that they're able to grow and develop, as well as be able to act as homes for other organisms. And another key aspect that the hawksbill sea turtle has is that it's able to carry organisms such as shrimp, crab, algae, and oysters, and even brittle stars inside of its shells. So many organisms will use the shell of the hawksbill sea turtle and make it their home. And this is basically a beneficial relationship to them. While it neither harms nor destroys the hawksbill sea turtle shells, it allows for organisms to make it a home. And so they are able to live their lives inside the hawksbill sea turtle. And like I said before, the hawksbill sea turtle also maintains healthy seagrass by constantly grazing it. Here's a picture in the top left corner of a hawksbill sea turtle eating seagrass and making sure that it remains healthy. If there is an overamount or overabundance of seagrass, it begins to start to decay and it begins to become bad. And so the hawksbill sea turtle makes sure that it's kept to the right amount, and so that they are able to grow and able to live in a healthy environment. And lastly, the hawksbill sea turtle provides nutrients for the beaches and prevents coastal erosion by laying their eggs. Now let's get into some conservation efforts in order to try and save the species of hawksbill sea turtle. So a couple of the main ways that the hawksbill sea turtle are being recognized and being saved is that countries have created laws now that prevent killing of the hawksbill sea turtle for their eggs and shells. While there are some other countries that still allow this to happen, there are many countries that are starting to recognize the endangered species and have created laws that ban poachers from taking their eggs, that ban poachers for killing hawksbill sea turtle for their shells. And so this is one of the direct efforts that are used in order to help save and hopefully help this population continue to grow. And so another key aspect is that organizations are being created to treat and save injured hawksbill sea turtles by treating them and helping build habitats for them that are safe for them. And so what I mean by injured is that, like I said before, when many of the hawksbill sea turtles consume trash and other plastic and stuff like that, it begins to harm their bodies. And so they will be treated for that. And then in the picture of the top left is an example of a hawksbill sea turtle being in that is injured, that is being saved. And in the picture above, this hawksbill sea turtle got tangled up in a net, and the net was wrapped around its throat, and it was ultimately choking him. And so this picture is a picture of a person cutting away the net, which is in turn helping in the end saving the hawksbill sea turtle's life. And so a couple of the main organizations that focus on saving the hawksbill sea turtle are the Florida Hawksbill Sea Project and the Sea Turtle Foundation. These are the two main organizations that are constantly at work in order to help save these species. Now let's get into the reflection of why I chose the hawksbill sea turtle. So through this project, I've learned many different aspects, unique aspects to the hawksbill sea turtle, and I've learned different ways and how organisms benefit from the hawksbill sea turtle. And through this, I've seen the different habitats that can live, the different diets, and I've also seen the important role that the hawksbill sea turtle plays in our ecosystem, in the marine ecosystem. And so without them, the whole ecosystem of the reef would collapse. And remains essential that society recognizes that this species is endangered and does everything it can to save them, because in the end, without them, the survival of the species and the ecosystem of the reef would ultimately collapse and be destroyed. And lastly, here's a slide of all my references that I used throughout my project. And thank you so much for watching my project. I hope that you learned more about the hawksbill sea turtle, and thank you again so much.